This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. If you're interested in how your business or interest group can support Dispatches from Planet Albany, contact david.lombardo at wcny.org. And if you're interested in personally supporting the show, visit capitalpressroom.org/donate.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out, and he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is Dispatches from Planet Albany, a WCNY podcast about power and politics in state government. And on this episode, we're examining the power of good government groups in New York's state government in light of New York Democrats essentially flipping them the bird as they embrace the possibility of a mid-decade partisan redistricting amendment in sharp contrast to the amendment that was shepherded through New York a little over a decade ago. To discuss the influence of Goo-Goos in Planet Albany, we're joined in the studio by Blair Horner, Senior Policy Advisor for the New York Public Interest Research Group. Welcome back, Blair.
Thanks for having me. And the gravity feels the same on Planet Albany.
Well, that was something I want to get to because you've been here for a few decades, and I have to imagine you've seen the influence of good government groups wax and wane, and we can get there in a second. But for starters, how big of a deal from a good government perspective is the effort in Albany right now, which seems like it's in its infancy, to basically undermine the constitutional redistricting amendment from 2014?
Well, I mean, so broadly speaking, of course, the state can't do anything about its constitution before the 2026 election.
Sure.
And that's what this is supposedly being triggered by. Texas, Missouri, possibly, Indiana, possibly, changing their rules at the request of the president to basically rig their elections to help get Republicans elected to the House. And so Democratic governors, to some extent, have decided to sort of make the counter argument. Governor Hochul's made the argument here in New York that it's political war and that she wants to change redistricting in New York. Now, she can't do it before the 2026 election.
Right.
So we opposed the 2014 election, constitutional amendment, because we thought it would end up being a mess. Unfortunately, we were right. And so if the legislature and the governor want to change the Constitution to make redistricting work better, we're all for that, and they have time to do it. They should take their time and do it right, not have a rush to judgment.
Sure, that's not what's on the table, though. And I have to
We'll
imagine...
We'll see what happens in 6 months, right? I mean, they don't have to do anything right away. And if they haven't from now until June, the bill that was in is about allowing them the resolution that's in is about allowing them to have mid-census, mid-10-year changes to redistricting. And then the governor said she might want to get rid of the bipartisan redistricting commission. Now, that's not in the resolution. Mm-hmm. And so maybe the door is open and they can fix it. That's fine with us. It's about time to fix it.
I mean, no offense, but you sound like you have some misplaced optimism here.
Well, you were asking before about good government groups.
Sure.
And I've been doing it for 40-something years. Here's the reason, right? Maybe it's misplaced, but I'm an optimist.
But I have to imagine while you were not on board with the 2014 amendment, it's probably better than what we had in the past, or do you think that getting rid of the 2014 amendment's not that big of a deal?
Well, changing the 2014 amendment to actually do what it was advertised to do is what we support. Mm-hmm. The 2014 amendment, they actually wrote it into the Constitution, say it's an independent redistricting commission, which it is not. A court of law said that it is not an independent redistricting. It's a bipartisan one, and it's designed to have basically gridlock, and that's what we got. And so that has to be fixed. If there are circumstances under which a mid-10-year period of time where you would want to change the lines again, like mass change in population in one part of the state, well, then let's talk about that. But it shouldn't be based on some other state saying they're going to do redistricting and that triggers something in New York, because that happens all the time.
So there's the component of the amendment that deals with the redistricting commission, but isn't there also language dealing with, say, a partisan gerrymandering in the Constitution now as a result of that change? I mean, that seems like a meaningful consequence that we saw actually play out in some of the court rulings dealing with the congressional maps. And I have to imagine that if Democrats here in Albany are going to pry open the state constitution, that's going to be something that gets changed as well.
That's possible. I mean, it's certainly possible. The Democrats are just as likely to want to redistrict things in a way that benefits them as Republicans would when they're in charge. So I'm not saying that everything in the state constitution that was put in 2014 is bad, but there's no priorities setting for what matters most when you're doing it. And the fact that the courts had to step in and essentially do the redistricting themselves, I think underscores the fact that the Constitution as it's written is a mess.
So I want to play a clip from earlier in August with the governor talking about redistricting, and here's how she sort of defended the attacks that she knows she's going to get and is getting from good government groups, NYPIRG aside.
With all due respect to the good government groups, politics is a political process.
What does that mean to you? I mean, to me it sounds like she's saying drawing the lines is separate from governing, and this is about politics, and therefore all's fair in love and war, so pipe down.
Well, I mean, it's, we'll get into this, I assume, a little bit more when we talk about the power of good government groups. But they love us when we're with them, and they hate us when we're not. And in this particular case, I totally disagree with the governor's analysis. It's not about politics. It's supposed to be about where people live and keeping communities of interest together, and representing and making sure that you have one person, one vote. It's not about politics. It's not supposed to be, well, how do we rig the system to benefit one political party over another? There are lots of people in America, the vast majority of whom do not care one way or the other what Democrats or Republicans are thinking about. And why shouldn't their interests be the most important? And in New York, the blanks, the people who are not registered in any political party, outnumber Republicans, and yet they have no seat at the table in redistricting. So the system should be about the public's best interest, not the political party's best interest. And so that means we disagree with the governor on her analysis.
So one view on what the New York Democrats are trying to do is that Democrats need to fight back, that they need to take a majority in Congress because this is about saving democracy. And that's not necessarily a partisan take. That's kind of what Common Cause, another good government group, has argued in their case for not intervening or making a hissy fit about what California is doing. The alternative view from a good government group, Reinvent Albany, was cited in Spectrum News saying, we fundamentally don't think that New York is going to save American democracy by gerrymandering. Where do you come down on this?
Well, again, I think the redistricting process in New York needs to be overhauled. So they should do that.
With a lens toward helping one party or another?
No, the lens toward representing the interests of the 20 million people that live here. And that's the most important thing. So there's that. If you want to try to, and they're talking about the 2026 election cycle. So nothing that changes in the Constitution is going to impact the 2026 election cycle. So if you really want to meaningfully do something, and if the governor wanted to use her bully pulpit to do this, let's make the New York Republican members of Congress, the House members, say they're not going to stand for this, because after all, it is also, if the Democrats have their way, it'll be their necks on the chopping block, and certainly from the perspective, they should stand up for democracy. So I would argue to push the New York Republicans, members of the House, to tell the president and the Speaker Johnson that that they should pull back, and if they don't, they're willing to hold up the federal budget in order to save democracy. That is actually something meaningful. That is actually something that could happen given the razor-thin majority of the House. And that's something that should be the priority of, if you want to stop what's happening nationally, the race to the bottom isn't the answer. We need to appeal to people's better motives or even their basic political motives in New York and to argue to stop what's going on in the country. And they can do it. There are 7 members of the House in New York. The razor-thin majority in the House means they need every single one of those votes in order to pull off the continuing resolution at the end of September, and they should use their leverage. Instead of, we've heard from some members of Congress, the Republicans, oh, look what Democrats do in New York. That's don't blame me, blame the guy behind the tree. You have to do something now, and doing something now means standing up to the president, showing some political courage that they want to stop what's going on.
Well, clearly, New York Democrats are interested in revisiting this topic, and they're not going to come back during 2025 to do this in some sort of special session. It's likely to be part of the legislative session in 2026 if it's done at all. With that understanding, how should good government groups approach this upcoming debate in order to be as influential as possible? And are you already having conversations among yourselves at your secret meetings, or do you still think there's time to build up some sort of coalition of the willing?
The eternal optimist that I am supportive of the coalition of the willing. I mean, everybody's sort of all over the place on this, and so we would need to sort of cobble things together. In 2014, there was a split among the groups about groups that supported the 2014 amendment and the 2014 and those who opposed.
How did that break down?
It was there was a bunch of groups, right? But the key ones that your listeners might be aware of would be that Common Cause and NYPIRG opposed the constitutional amendment, and Citizens Union and the League of Women Voters supported it. And so that was sort of the split, and Governor Cuomo put his thumb on the scale to push, using his bully pulpit to push it along and to get it passed, and it did pass significantly. It wasn't even really significantly. It wasn't close, that's for sure, because people wanted redistricting reform, and what they got sold was a bill of goods that turns out it wasn't good enough. It was better probably than the status quo, but certainly not good enough, and not what it was advertised to be. So I think where we can go would be to develop what are the metrics by which the legislature should determine if what they're doing makes sense. And one would be to get rid of the bipartisan commission, have an independent commission. One would be to prioritize what are most important in the various criteria that are currently in the state constitution. And one would be to sort of lock in a small margin of error between the largest population districts and the smallest population districts. For the Congress, it's plus or minus one person, and we think it should be closer in the legislature. There's a law that does 2%, but they sort of ignored it when they're putting the lines together last time.
What do you have to do between now and whenever there might be a possible vote on some sort of resolution to make state lawmakers actually care about your opinion on this? Because I think for most New Yorkers, this is not an issue that's going to motivate them to vote one way or another, and therefore the politicians aren't going to give two farts if you're ranting and raving about it unless you move the needle with the voters. So how do you do that? Because it doesn't seem possible to me.
It's very hard. There's no doubt about it. It's not like any of the groups that are normally considered in this category have oodles of money that they can spend on, advertising. In fact,
you can't increase student fees to get NYPIRG some more cash?
As you know, the student fees are not used for lobbying.
Okay.
But the last time around, Ed Koch, the former mayor, he was almost 90 years old. He was running around the state trying to make this happen. There was money that was raised to try to make it happen. And this time around, something like that would have to happen. But first, where you start on any campaign, if you're a nonpartisan organization, you don't make campaign contributions, you don't endorse anybody, where you start is trying to come up with what makes sense in terms of good public policy. And you start from there. And there are well-meaning legislators that will be supportive of that. Whether or not you can build up to majorities in both houses to push through a constitutional amendment, who knows? The governor doesn't play a role in the constitutional formal.
Not a formal role,
right,
but she's got a bully pulpit.
That's right. And I've worked on constitutional amendments where the governor was with us, and that was helpful. I've worked on constitutional amendments where he was opposed, and that was unhelpful.
Do you think that Republicans could be allies in this effort because they have a vested interest in seeing the state not embrace some sort of partisan gerrymander, and would probably make the case that a nonpartisan system that is quote unquote best for the voters maybe gives them the fairest chance moving forward?
I haven't spoken to them, of course, but that could be the case. It also, everybody in Albany, Planet Albany, tends to be dripping with cynicism. And some people may view any changes to the Constitution just hurt them, and that they're better off just keep going to the courts. Now, that may change. But again, first things first, you got to have a proposal that sort of links together the interests of a large number of organizations, and you sort of take it from there.
So putting aside the fact that we haven't really seen the final version of some sort of plan that Democrats may or may not take up on redistricting, there clearly is an attitude from the governor on down, even the Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, that, you know what, good government groups are great and fine when it doesn't necessarily cost us anything. And I'm curious whether that sounds like a new mantra out of Albany and the political leaders here, or whether this is par for the course during your time.
I've been here since 1984. It's more part of the course than it's not. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, if there's been a series of very big scandals, and Planet Albany is looking for a place to sort of respond to, or make it look like they're responding, then the leverage that good government groups has is bigger. But if there tends to be, like it is now, relatively calm, there hasn't been major scandals, at least I can think of off the top of my head, that is driving the process, then I think we get viewed as validators for whatever it is they come up with, unless that they're like feared. I've had lawmakers all the years I've been here saying, elections don't turn on whether or not we do something in terms of the area of reform. And to some extent, of course, that's true. While the public wants a not corrupt government that responds to the public's best interests, they have such a cynical view of government, sadly, of democracy in general in this country, that's not at the top tier. And so lawmakers know that, the polling tells them that, and it makes it very hard to get anything done, significant to get anything done.
Is it easier to get things done as a good government group if you're inside the tent peeing out as opposed to outside the tent peeing in? I mean, I think about sometimes good government groups, and maybe I'm misreading it, but seem like they will hold their fire in some cases because they don't necessarily want to antagonize, say, the people in power, because you want to live to fight another day. So is there something to that idea that you want to be part of the team as opposed to maybe being seen as an outsider?
I mean, that is always, every organization and every issue I work on, that's a calculation that everybody has to make. And, when it comes to the reform stuff, I mean, the only way that we, our organizations, can have a meaningful impact in sort of the public domain is if people believe that we call balls and strikes fairly. And if we're viewed as just a front group for some political party or some moneyed interest, then that diminishes the ability of the group to have any impact. And so I think, it's better to just call balls and strikes the way we deal with it. To be honest with people, to try to get people to do the right thing on the inside, and to appeal to the angels on their shoulders, than it is necessarily to be fighting with them all the time. But sometimes that's what it takes.
Are there examples in your 41 years here where you feel like good government groups have cozied up too much to politicians with the idea that it would ultimately benefit them and their good government agenda?
I can't speak for other groups, so it's hard to say. I mean,
Come on, you're a senior policy advisor now. You can throw lobs.
I can see again, there were major scandals in the 80s that drove significant work by then Governor Mario Cuomo to try to change the system. He appointed the usual, he appointed a Blue Ribbon Task Force to sort of look into it. It was headed by this guy, John Furyk, who's the dean of Fordham Law School. And they pumped out 22 reports. They held hearings. They forced Mario Cuomo, and then Attorney General Bob Abrams to testify under oath before them. So they took it really seriously. And some ethics reforms came out of that. I mean, the legislature drafted one that Mario Cuomo then vetoed because it wasn't tough enough. Now, in retrospect, did it make any difference? Not really. It didn't make a huge difference in terms of the ethics laws in New York or campaign finance or whatever, but it did lay the groundwork for what the right thing was. So there have been times when a governor, it usually has to be the governor, has to sort of step into the breach to lead a reform movement if anything significant is going to happen. And that's been the case, all the years I've been here. So the fact of good government groups, individual groups in any area, cozying up to the administration because they'd rather be on the inside working, have good relationships on the inside. Well, that happens in all the issue areas. And some groups prefer to be sort of viewed as a think tank as compared to a grassroots, campaign organizing group.
Well, my brain goes to Common Cause New York and the Senate Democrats, where it sometimes seems, from my perspective, like they will go out of their way to provide them cover. But I won't make you comment on that unless you want to.
Since I have not seen that, it would be hard for me to make a comment other than to say I haven't seen it. I believe that you have two eyes and you can see things, but that I haven't seen
Younger, sharper eyes.
Well, actually, I'm not so sure anymore. I have bionic eyes now, so I can see through walls.
Well, what about people picking up the phone for you? So we've had Governor Hochul now in office for about 4 years. Has your access to this administration been any different than, say, the 10 years of the Cuomo administration?
It is. It's similar in terms of the willingness to meet with us.
Which was they will, or they just neither would meet with you?
No, they will.
Okay.
And the major difference between the Andrew Cuomo administration and the Kathy Hochul administration is that when they're mad at you, it is the Cuomo guys sometimes were, I thought, way over the top in terms of how they would treat people.
I find that hard to believe.
I know,
Blair.
I know, it's really shocking.
It
was. It was.
Any
like
examples come to mind?
Well, being yelled at, right?
Okay.
So
who would yell at you?
It depended on who was assigned to the task.
Mm-hmm.
It worked its way up the food chain pretty fast. And so normally, the way, like if a Governor Pataki was mad at us or something like that, it would be like, okay, you can't meet with anybody on the second floor, and then that would stop once they wanted to talk to us again, because we're not here to try to get somebody elected or to get somebody beat. We're just really just interested in getting bill policy passed on a broad spectrum of issues, and so we can be very helpful too. So, we're not looking to burn bridges, but sometimes the issues escalate. Now, again, we met with Governor Andrew Cuomo, we met with Governor Kathy Hochul, we've met with top staff in both. So I don't think the access issue is significantly different, although one's been in power for just a few years and one was in power for a decade. But it's less brutal an experience when you're opposed.
What about in the legislature? Democrats have had the assembly for decades, and I'm curious whether their sort of entrenchment has changed at all from Shelley Silver to Carl Hastie. And what about the state Senate, where, now people with a short memory won't think about the Senate Dems as having been in the minority, but they were in the wilderness for a while, and I'm curious whether that experience has shaped what they're willing or interested in doing and working with on. And you're kind of smiling and looking back into your memory. It looks like
there's just paint it with a broad brush. When you have bipartisan government, it doesn't matter who the governor is. You have bipartisan government. It's always easy to do things that you think appeal to your base, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, because you can just blame the other guy for not doing it. Right? So there was always this sort of ability of, we love public financing, says the Assembly. The Senate's not going to do it. We'll pass it. Shelley Silver once debated the bill on the floor of the Assembly. Speaker Fink did the same thing, debated themselves on public financing to advance these issues. They knew the Republicans weren't going to do it, so it's relatively easy to do. This time around, when public financing came up, it was the Assembly that was the problem. Now, that could be a difference in leadership. It could be, it's not the same legislators that are in there, 10, 15 years later. But certainly it could easily be that now that the consequences are real, the political calculation on what to do about policy changes.
Is there any reason to suspect that the dynamic you've experienced over the last 41 years is going to look any different the next 41 years?
Well, I may not. My bionic eyes may have stopped working by then, David. So there may be that. It'd be sort of a miracle, actually. Now that I think about it, if I was here for 41 more years,
112.
Unless someone stuck me in a vase and had me on the shelf in here with you.
We might do that. we might have to stuff you and find some space.
No, that's stuffing. That's too gross.
To greet visitors.
The box would be fine. It's external force. It's like if an individual governor gets elected that really wants to sort of change things in Albany, then that could dramatically sort of shift what happens here. Or there's some sort of external either event or events. That
you need like a Watergate or a big indictment of somebody.
Yeah, there was stuff like that over the years, and that's really what drove the major changes that have ever occurred here. Is the sort of the perp walk of key elected officials or powerful interest groups. And was around the year 2000, there was a major scandal with the tobacco industry that led to the bans in smoking in bars, for example, and having the highest cigarette tax. Those things came out of a scandal, not because the public health argument was so compelling. That argument had been made for 20 years. So that can change the dynamic in terms of Planet Albany and get it to respond in a meaningful, comprehensive way.
You noted that good government groups are supposed to be calling balls and strikes. There is a bit of a push in D.C. to allow nonprofits to wade into political campaigns to make endorsements. Do you think there is any benefit to good government groups having that sort of leverage, being able to say, we'll endorse you in this campaign, and maybe that moves the needle or not? Probably not. But do you think that is a tool that would be meaningful to some degree?
I think it would hurt.
Yeah?
Because unless you can back up the endorsement with money, right? Because it's not, a lot of groups endorse candidates. The ones that move to the top of the sort of lobbying food chain are the ones that can deliver either bodies and money or both.
You don't have bodies? I thought there's all those NYPIR kids running around.
We don't have the money side of it in terms of campaign contributions.
But you got kids, right?
And we have lots of young people because they're idealistic, they're energetic, they like to work hard, and they care.
And they want to be directed. They want you to tell them whose door to knock on, Blair.
They want to see public policy change because they're terrified of some of the things that they see down the road for their lives. Like if I was young now, which I'm not, although young at heart, I would care about climate change. I would care a lot about it because we were all just choking on Canadian wildfire air, and New York City still is today. And so, that's bad. That's bad. There are wildfires now in Maine, which is normally pretty wet. State of Washington's preparing for that. So I could see why young people would care. When I got involved, we cared a lot because there was this thing called the draft. So that sort of got our attention. Otherwise, dumb attention that I have when I'm an 18-year-old male. But it got my attention. So did the Clean Water, Clean Air Act. I mean, all the Watergate and everything else. So just to the point, though, I don't think the endorsement makes that much difference. I'm sure it would help in terms of accessing, particularly if you're picking winners all the time. But you're just another one of the groups that do that. And I think, again, what makes our role unique is the fact that we try to call balls and strikes. We're not looking to try to help one team over another. We're not trying to help one particular candidate over another. We're just trying to get good public policy passed as we see it. And I think that's where the sort of the public support for groups like ours is the strongest, and I think that gets eroded if people think differently.
Any mistakes you think good government groups have made in the past in their lobbying efforts, broadly speaking, or maybe in a specific instance where maybe the situation was ripe for some sort of reform and for whatever reason good government groups couldn't seal the deal?
Yeah, I think it's less that than it is like everything else. Every organization has their own agenda, and they see what they most important priorities is based on that. And it's not like, all the groups talk to each other on a sort of regular basis, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what Common Cause thinks is the most important thing is necessarily what NYPIR thinks is the most important thing. And as we talked about before, the 2014 constitutional amendment, there was a split because the groups looked at that differently. Some groups were saying this was an opportunity for us to get some good things in the state constitution. Other groups were saying this opportunity is huge and we should be going for even more. And so that tension there is always there. So I don't think it's necessarily anything wrong, but it is a reflection, given the circumstances of trying to get reforms passed, you really need all the groups to sort of be rowing in the same direction.
Well, finally, I mentioned the idea of looking ahead 41 years in the future, not to be too morbid about it, but even if we think 10 or 20 years in the future, we're not going to have what I would consider the big three of good government advocates in this space anymore. And to me, that's Barbara Bartoletti, who's already stepped away from the League of Women Voters, yourself at NYPIRG, and Common Cause Sue. And I wonder whether you think that's a meaningful transition when that does finally happen, when you guys aren't necessarily haranguing lawmakers. And do you feel like there's another generation that's out there ready to take up the mantle in a meaningful way and with the same time commitment that you guys have dedicated to it?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, but everybody's different. Everybody has their own skills. Everybody brings their own experience. So when you mentioned Barbara Bartoleti, she retired a few years ago before the pandemic. There's a new executive director there now, a name of Erica Smitka, who's the executive director, and she's young. She's mid-30s. She's young, maybe your age, Dave.
Who can say?
And so she's working very hard and she's very committed, and we'll see what happens, right? In NYPIRG, I used to be the executive director. I have stepped back to senior policy advisor.
Like a minute ago, you were executive director.
And January 1, we have a new executive director, and her name is Megan Ahern, and I think she's about 40. And so that's already happening. I don't know what Common Cause's plans are. But you have to sort of look to the future because we all know that no one lasts forever. Now, that being said, I want to keep, certainly personal view, I'd like to keep doing this work until I can't. So, and we have had we run an internship program. We have a lobbying internship program. People go through our program. They end up in different organizations and across state government. And so that's part of our deal. We want to give young people the opportunity. And when I get done with this or I can't do it for whatever reason anymore, someone will take my place.
Well, we've been speaking with Blair Horner. He is the Senior Policy Advisor for the New York Public Interest Research Group. Blair, thanks for visiting us in studio.
Thanks for having me.
Was it a bloodless coup?
It was a bloodless coup.